My name's Brad Laddusaw, president of the California Mortgage Association. And I have Paul here with PM Appraisals. Paul, would you mind taking a few moments, introduce yourself and your company?
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me. My name's Paul Marinkovich. I'm with PM Appraisals. The appraisal business started about 44 years ago as a temporary job, and I've just never been able to shake it loose. Every time, the market goes through highs and lows, and every time that the market goes through a high, we're all excited about the profession. Then when it goes through a low, we start looking for other jobs or other businesses. But over 44 years, I guess I've gotten pretty good at it. I've kind of stayed in the business.
So 44 years. When and you said it
I know I
started
don't
as a
look that old, do I?
oh, forever young. I think
I
there's a
was three
song
years
for it.
old when I started to pray.
Oh,
Started
that's
pretty
too.
much
But,
at 19.
but you said it was just part time. Did you have family or a friend that was in the business, and they say, "Hey, come check it out," or how'd you get into it?
Well, I started out in real estate as a broker. And was working for my dad. And, yeah, I don't know if you ever worked for a family member or your father. I mean, my son works with me now, so that works a little bit better, but it was a little bit difficult. My dad left when I was a kid. So, it's kind of want my dad proud of me. So let me go get my real estate license. I'm going to go move up to Stockton. We're originally from Southern California, from the San Fernando Valley. And, him and mom got divorced when I was young. So it's like, let's go make dad proud of me. So went up there, did really well, sold a bunch of real estate, but then, you know, some sort of dynamic, was going on. And I didn't fill the hole I was looking to fill,
Yeah,
make dad proud of me. So, I was sitting at an open house one day, working on the weekends, probably just having some clients, parading them around and not buying anything and making any money. And this appraiser pulls up in a BMW, you know, uh, and he says, "I very rarely work on weekends, but I'm doing it here." And it looked, he came around, was there for about 20 minutes, left, and I said, "That doesn't look like a bad job." He doesn't really say he has to work on weekends like I'm doing, and he gets paid before he does his work. I think that's great. And so now I'm an appraiser 44 years later. So I work on weekends, you
so,
know,
yeah, right.
all the things that I thought,
And I think that's a very funny point you bring up there about the appraiser. Everyone's slow, and he's pulling up with a nice car and kind of staying steady Eddie. It's like the gold rush. It wasn't the miners that made it big. It was the companies that made the
the,
shovels and
the
sold the
people that sold the
jeans.
shovels. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's basically it.
uh,
And yeah, so, so then I came down to back to Southern California and started with Gibraltar Savings and started worked the first half of my career pretty much for banks and savings and loans and things. Back in the
perfect. And
wild, wild west of the savings and loans
well,
era.
I mean, shoot, over 40 something years, you've seen damn near all the ups and downs.
Yeah, I mean,
Quite a
the
few.
thing is, one thing as you get older, you learn about these cycles. We get all hyped up when things are rushing and things are appreciating, and you see all the younger, the loan agents and people just really out there, And I keep warning them. I say, hey, that at some point we're going to hit this. That's what the appraiser's for, right? We're supposed
Yeah.
to warn you about this stuff. And at some point, this stuff is going to collapse, and you're going to start over again.
And that has gotta be this is not a question we chat about, but that's gotta be a challenge that I'm sure you faced with some clients. I'm sure you have certain lender pressure saying, "Hey, we needed to appraise here." You're like,
Oh
"That's not how
yeah,
I
yeah.
operate." And then you got some borrowers that, "Hey, I needed to appraise here." You're like, "That's not how I operate." Do you feel like you get those battles from time to
Yeah, I
time?
get that pressure, not as much lately, after the last correction and, the Dodd-Frank and all the things that came as a result of that. They're trying to, especially for residential appraisals, and I primarily do commercial, and like, I've been working with the CMA with people who work with CMA for like 30 years. So private money lenders tend to do some of the unusual properties. They're not typically doing the typical conforming stuff. They're doing all the weird stuff. So,
Yeah.
over the years, since I'm pretty much, I believe I'm pretty much the number one private money appraiser in California. And so I get a lot of and then a lot of my clients, they'll reserve giving me the stuff that's really unusual. things that other people have a hard time handling. So,
And you're probably like, "I'm
so
okay
I
with
end up doing a bunch of unusual properties.
and you're probably like, "I'm okay with boring too, guys," send
Yeah,
some
give me
vo
some of that easy, boring stuff once in a while. But actually, I do like the unusual stuff and having to use the brain a little bit. But
no.
about people giving you pressure and stuff. Yeah, I get it. I get it all the time. But I tell someone if they're going to bribe me, they're going to have to give me several $1 million because I'm going to have to retire.
Yeah,
Buy a
that's
place in
actually a
Mexico or
pretty
something, and live on the beach and be able to live out my life. Because really, as an appraiser, all you really have is your integrity. All you have is all you have is the ability to tell the truth. I mean, that's ultimately your ultimate obligation. Now, to the loan officer, they want to make the deal, but I mean, if they make a bad deal, ultimately the people who they either broker the loan through or who they work for, are going to suffer those repercussions. So in essence, my only job is to be ethical. My only job is to tell the truth. And my only job is to give my client the information that they need to make a good informed decision to protect their investment.
Yeah, and that's something that I mean, I've always appreciated when I call you, you answer, and the response is always great. But then just feedback. It's hey, Paul, we got this unique one coming through. You're like, yeah, that is a tricky one. Here's what you got to look out for. Blah blah blah, and you kind of walk it through. But it's your professional estimate of value. You are
Exactly. It is an opinion. I mean, an appraisal is an opinion of value. So, you could have four different appraisers appraising the same property and get four different values. Four
yeah,
different, and then within the value, there's other things like, what's the highest and best use of the property? That's a big issue these days. Um, for instance, there's been some Senate bills that have passed, like the whole affordable housing thing that's going on in California. Um, commercial properties, you didn't used to be able to build a residential project on those. But with the passing of some of these recent Senate bills, now commercial properties are, hey, let's build some affordable housing. So all of a sudden, some of these underutilized commercial properties are becoming land sales, where they're tearing it down and putting up 5, 6, 7 story affordable housing type of developments. So the landscape changes, and oftentimes, someone like you, and I believe we've done it in the past, where you've come and you said, "Hey, I've gotten this appraisal. It doesn't look very good," and you'll give
it,
it to me,
it
and
looks
then
like my son did it, and he's 5. It's like,
yeah, exactly, with a crayon, and I get these all the time, and they've misappraised the property, they've appraised the wrong use, they haven't looked at what the highest and best use of the property is. Or it's been an obvious steer. They're picking up the high comps and all that sort of stuff. So I redo a lot of appraisals. You know,
yep. Yeah, we saw one hit my not to go down the bad appraiser rabbit hole, but I saw one hit my desk. It was like a month and a half ago. One, it was an old appraisal. That's my favorite. It's, "Hey, I got this deal coming through a broker. I got this property. It's this office building. It's worth 6 million. I got this appraisal from 2022, showing 6.5. So I think 6 is reasonable. Can you do it? Like, well, for starters,
oh,
2020.
they wanted you to accept the 2022 appraisal
Oh,
after after the
it,
whole
it
office industry fell apart after the
finally started
pandemic.
coming
Yeah,
through, and then I'm of the belief not all office is created equal, but you look at some of this corporate office and all that, that's tough and tricky. You look at Irvine, you have one that will trade for land value because 'cause they're gonna be building units like you talked about, and then you'll
yeah,
have
yeah.
another one that's sold large owner user, and they're paying top price per square foot, and they're gonna just hang on to this thing for their own bit. It's just all over the place. So it's
Right.
it
And
it
who do you sell? After the pandemic, the whole office landscape changed. It's
yeah,
just these large corporate offices. Before you'd have the large corporate office and all the goodies and stuff because you want to promote the talent. You want to
yeah,
bring the talent in. So you build a beautiful office, you stock the kitchens, you cater lunches, you make it an environment that they want to hang around and stay at, and all that. Then they had the pandemic, everyone went home and started working from Costa Rica or wherever they're working from. And now the talent, they don't want to come into the office. The talent wants to work remotely. So now you have all this gigantic office space. And what do you do with it? I'm appraising right now a big 3-story project up in Davis, and it used to be occupied by the Department of Forestry. did a lot of their experiments there and stuff like that. They needed a lot of office space. Well, they've consolidated, but like a Google or Google has scaled back a lot of plans. A lot of these people with these large office, so these large office buildings are obsolete. What do you do with them? The WeWork concept came in. We'll go ahead and rent out small offices in a larger facility and provide all the clerical stuff and that really after the pandemic that kind of went away too. That's we were kind of bellied up. They're not doing too great. So you're not seeing a lot of. So what do you do with these office buildings? You
Yeah, and I
chop them
think
up. You do other things with them. There's been some laws where California's tried to say, hey, we'll allow you to convert them into residential housing, but they're not really functional for residential housing. And very few projects have done that, despite the fact that they changed the rules to accommodate that.
and it's just kinda how these office buildings were built. They were not built or designed for residential, so trying to take an office conversion into units, that has to be a very unique layout from the onset, I would believe, on that office, or to what your point you highlighted a couple minutes ago, you have developers coming in and they're buying it for effectively land value, scraping it, and then starting
That's
over.
basically have to do because I mean, y- residential is a lot of plumbing. Got to have a lot of plumbing, right? You got to have bathroom for every unit, right? And if you're putting 25 units in a property that has 3 restrooms, you got to do a lot of retrofitting and plumbing. So California thought, hey, this would be a great way to take some of these utter underutilized buildings, ones that are obsolete, and turn them into housing because we need housing so darn bad. And it just, I would say you probably easily count the number that even were tried on one hand in all of California. There's just not a lot of
Yeah.
that going on.
And I think it with all these changing laws coming down the pipe, constantly bombarded. We have a good idea up here, but in reality, it's like all the local municipalities are trying to figure it out on there. And I look at the ADU laws, for example. I mean, you have
Yeah.
some very favorable ones in San Diego, and then you have them come back and say, yeah, you can't do the high density ADUs or as many as we said, a year past. But you have where it can get tricky, I would assume, on the valuation side you're appraising probably a triplex slightly different than you are an 8 unit. And then in the eyes more so in the eyes of the lender, right? Because if you have a residential lender, they might go 1 to 4 units. How do these ADUs get classified if you add maybe 2 ADUs
Well,
and that
yeah,
3 goes
yeah.
to 5? And like
You get a lot of lenders and appraisers. You get a home, and then you convert the garage to an ADU. And hey, great, we can rent this out and stuff like that. Now, does that change an R1 zone property to an R2 or R3 zone property? So you really don't appraise it as a duplex because it's not. It's a single family with an ADU. So, um, it's and then if you just take it from a purely income, standpoint, where you take what the rent is on the ADU and you go ahead and capitalize it and try to figure out a value that way, then who's the most likely buyer of the property? Is it an investor who's going to be looking at what the financial return is going to be from a cash flow perspective? Probably not. Probably it's going to be another homeowner who's going to occupy the home and then maybe lease out for a little bit of extra income. So how you value that is completely different than how you'd value like a traditional income producing property. Just
yeah,
because the first thing that you do when you look at an appraisal, 2 things is who is the most likely buyer. Who's going to buy this? Like back to our office building, we got an empty office building. Who's going to buy this? Is it going to be Google? Is going to come in and move 2,000 people into this office? No, that's not anymore who's buying those properties. It's going to be some sort of developer or person who's going to come and repurpose the property into something different. So if I'm appraising it like a Google is going to be the buyer and buy the property and move in, then I'm misappraising the property and misvaluing the property, right? So it's very important up front is that, so in an ADU situation, who are you selling that property to? Did you change the type of buyer who's going to purchase the property? And the answer is probably not. So so it's valued more like as a guest unit rather than an income producing property because maybe even the next owner doesn't want to lease out a property and have renters on site and in the place that they live. So it all kind of changes. And then they passed SB 9, which is called the California Home Act in 22, and that allows you actually to subdivide an existing property. Let's say you have a house on a property, and let's say you're on a 1 acre, you're on a 30,000 foot lot, and the zoning limitations are that you can only subdivide 1 acre lots. Well, with this SB 9, you're able to subdivide that lot, even though it's less than an acre, and be able to put a single family at an ADU on the new lot, and then also add an ADU on your lot. So effectively, what you're doing is you're taking one property and you're one housing unit and creating four housing units. That was the theory of why California thought that was such a good thing, right? But a lot of the local jurisdictions and stuff, even though they're kind of mandated to do it, they found ways. There's some things around. If it's a historical neighborhood or if it environmentally wouldn't work out well or things like that. So there's certain jurisdictions where that's worked really good, like Atherton, the highest zip code I think in the United States. A Silicon Valley area up there. Um, you get a lot that's 30,000. We did one, and they split it, and all of a sudden, the lot that they split is worth $10 million. So I mean, but is there any low income people going to move into that $10 million lot?
No,
Not
so
really.
so my and this is not a jab at investors out there, the ADU individuals, but my favorite thing is when they say my business partner and I talk about this all the time. We're building ADUs to bring affordable housing to the market. I'm like, you're building ADUs to drive your bottom line. Let's freaking call a spade a spade. You're not building for free. You're not building to take a loss. You're going the ADU route to increase the income that that asset can generate, which in turn can ideally drive a higher value of the
Yeah.
property, and you sell it for highest and best. And it's I think it's okay to say that, but some marketing individuals out there probably don't want them to do that. And it's like, let's just call a spade a spade. You're adding units to drive
And
income,
we can always
which
hide behind the fact that we're creating housing. That's where it's kind of where you go. But I mean, if you're in, I did one a couple of weeks ago in Pacific Beach down in San Diego, right near the ocean, and it was a 7 unit apartment, and they had four garages for the 7 units, right? And you've ever been to Pacific Beach on the
yeah,
weekend and tried to park? There's no parking, right? There's nothing. But they bought the property and then took the four car garage and made it into two more units. One was an ADU, and the other one was a junior ATU. And those things, one bedrooms down there, those probably rent for like $3,000 each, right? So all of a sudden, they converted two garages into two units, and they have another $6,000 a month of income. You know
yeah.
that
And they're not
those aren't
building that to
affordable
have
units,
lower
but yet
rents. They're not going to lease it out for 1,500. So it's
no, they're not affordable. Now, some of the affordable stuff that they require you to have X number of affordable units
yeah.
and things like that. That's something different. Those are different type of
No,
things.
and then I also think even these ADUs. I mean, 10 years ago, like in Los Angeles, you would have people that would be doing converting the garages and doing the ADUs before they even knew what to call them. They were ADUs, and they wouldn't get credited really any GLA or any square feet on the
Well, yeah,
building.
what they would basically they'd either do them one of two ways. One is they would do them illegally, which we see all the time. And a lot of those are being converted, if they were done right. And then the other one would be that usually if you like, for instance, if you want to turn a garage into a unit, not a unit, into, how into dwelling unit, then you'd have to recreate the parking that you displaced. You'd have to go build a carport somewhere, do something different. With the ADU laws, you don't have to do that. You can actually, so just like this one in Pacific Beach I was telling you about, all of a sudden a property that was already underparked with four units, with four parking spaces for 7 units in an area that has no parking, all of a sudden you've taken those four spaces away, and then you've added two more residents, right? So you're bringing more residents into the neighborhood, and you're pulling the parking out of the neighborhood.
And,
And a lot of
and
the ADU units are the same thing. I did another one down in San Diego where they're building 30 units 30 units on a property with no parking, not one parking spot. It was all affordable project. And I think it took me 15 minutes to park, even to go do the site inspection. And I had to park I got my steps in that day because I
Yeah.
had to park 4 or 5 blocks away and really hunt to find something just to get to the site. And I'm thinking, here we are going to build 30 more units, bring 30 more bodies or plus into the area, with their cars or whatever their transportation is, and it's only going to get worse.
And and that's where, I mean, right now, one, it's expensive to build in California. It's impossible to get anything approved, and once it's approved, it takes it's really long timeline to get those units to market. And I feel it's like almost across the board. But in San Diego, they're pushing high density and they're okay with no parking. So they're throwing in units, small units with no parking, and they're leasing right now. But if your crystal ball, because you've seen a lot of things over the years, you've seen probably certain strategies where people go hot and heavy, say, "Hey, we're going to be building a lot of office. We think that's going to be great." Now it's a lot of multifamily. This high density, small units, no parking. Do you see that potentially going? I don't want to use the
It's
term obsolete, but do you see them getting highest and best on rents 15 years from now when that demographic starts aging up and they they need parking? Maybe they have their first kid. They need a bath. What is your thought on
Well,
that?
it kind of started when SB 35 was where they started making it easier to build, to streamline the approval process for affordable housing. And that kind of started this act. I was doing one where they were doing in the valley, San Fernando Valley, where they were taking a mobile home park and they were converting it to an affordable housing project. And it was just, you know, first of all, they had to vacate the mobile home park. It took them, I don't know, it's like 12 years to do that because that's very hard to do because again, that's housing, right? So you're getting rid of housing to create more housing. And but when I started surveying the neighborhood in San Fernando Valley for projects either that were applied for or projects that were actually being constructed, I was amazed at the number of projects that are out there. I mean, 200 here, 150 there, 300 there. I mean, all this stuff in the pipeline. And a lot of it, it's if you're located within like, a half a mile of a transit area, like a bus stop or, some sort of major transit area, then they've reduced the parking sometimes to zero, where you don't even need any parking whatsoever. And, and then there's all these projects in the pipeline. So here I am appraising this one and saying, what's the likelihood this thing's going to get off the ground? So then with all these other projects, I mean, it looks good. I mean, administratively, they can do it. By right, they can do it. But does that mean that it's economically feasible? Maybe even today it's economically feasible, but by the time you get up and running and start going vertical with your construction, a lot of these things that are planned or projected or kind of under construction are already going to be built. So you're going to be competing with all this future housing coming online, you know, and so it gets overbuilt. So it's my personal opinion, right now where we're sitting that yes, it's being overbuilt, and at some point, it's a lot of these land sales and things that people are buying, to convert to affordable housing, are never going to be built. So if, right now I'm doing one where I've got a highest and best use of, what is the highest and best use, the existing commercial shopping center there is the highest and best use. It's in the middle of Hollywood, and it's like a studio where they store a lot of props and things like that, and got some creative office space and stuff. And the value of the land far outweighs the value of what's there, So we do the highest and best use and we appraise it as land, the best way to do that. And prove it, of course, because most people don't do that.
Yeah.
And then you appraise it at what its highest and best uses. I generally tend to give my lenders both values. I give them the value what it's worth as it is,
Yeah.
and then I give them the value what it's worth at its highest and best use if it's the land. That way, even though I'm giving them two values, and even though the highest and best use and the correct way to appraise it is as the land, I give them the option of saying, okay, well, what if I took it back and that changed, or else, I had to sell it. So they have both values to which they can underwrite to. You know what I
And
mean?
we're always looking in a stress test situation. It's like, we got X value, but what if here? And
What
I
if the
think
guy
that
walks out the front, chucks the keys on the roof, and what do you get back? The daisies aren't blooming. all those trade pictures that were in there that they're swearing were worth so much, they're all gone, long gone.
Oh,
And you get
yeah.
the crickets chirping in an empty building with a bunch of cobwebs.
Yeah,
And
and
that's what I try to give my clients the value. It's like, I'm not going to give you the value of, like, for instance, something has building permits and they're ready to build. It's RIT. They're ready to rock and roll with the thing, everything else, and then the lender takes the property back. Well, the guy takes his plans and his architect and everything else, because it's usually a foreclosure is a hostile situation, right? It's
mhm,
not a friendly situation.
yeah,
And so what, can the lender like walk in and finish the project? No, most lenders don't do that. They're lenders, they're not builders,
yeah,
right? So who are they going to sell it to? They're going to sell it to some developer who's going to take a cut and a discount to take that over. And they're not even guaranteed that they'd have access to the plans or being able to continue on with the permits. Maybe they've been expired. Maybe they don't even have the plans or the information that they need to finish the project, right? So
yeah,
so what do I appraise for the lenders? I appraise the way they're going to get it back.
yeah.
You know,
And that's where I think some lenders need to know what questions to ask of the appraiser. It's, "Hey, this is a value add deal. What is the current as is
right,
value?" And then, of course, highest and best. If the stars align and they finish their project, I'm of the belief there's quite a lot of pain sent on some balance sheets out there. I think lenders not real, or whoever the holder of that paper is that has been sold off. They have wind blowing through the property, and in any value add situation, I feel that the value kind of follows the J curve a little bit. So your as is value starts here, tear it down, value's going down on that property. And then as you start putting it back together, it kind of starts following back up. There's
right. And
eh,
most lenders, if they get at the bottom of that J curve, they're not going to go ahead and finish the project out. They're not builders. They're not. That's not their expertise, their
n-
forte. So, they're going to dump it to a developer who's going to want to buy. The guy who's going to buy it's going to want to build it and make a profit. So if you don't build that profit into your as is scenario, right? Because that's who
yeah,
you're most, again, who's the most typical buyer.
yeah.
Yes.
And and then back to the comments in your crystal ball on overbuilding the multifamily on that one specific type of unit. You get the small units, no parking. I think you in 10 years you will see those lease not pulling the same demand they are now, and I don't think it's necessarily gonna create affordable housing because of an oversupply. It's just because 'cause they're not desirable. Uh, or f
Right. And if you look, there's more people leaving California than coming to California.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
So, I mean, is there, what kind of demands are going to be in the future? And, you also look at, there's a lot of people being removed right now, that took a lot of that affordable housing.
yeah.
And landscapes change, and trends change and things like that. I think perfect example is cannabis. I mean, I'm the number one cannabis appraiser in California.
Oh, I didn't know
Uh,
that. So
yeah.
what type of you said you do tricky appraisals or unique assets. You do cannabis. What are some other unique assets you do? And then I wanna jump into, the valuations you're doing for cannabis.
That's my shirt I wear when I go. Uh, Cannabis, the same thing. I mean, cannabis. They started. They passed the recreational act around 2016 or so, and everyone and the brother, every old hippie and the brother, man, wanted to go buy 5,000 square foot warehouse in Long Beach and
Yep,
start growing weed, and wow, my dream come true, and all that sort of stuff. Uh, with the regulations and everything, here we are, 2025. The price of wholesale, mixed light is around 250 bucks a pound. Back then when they started, it was 2,500 to 3,000. So that there's no more of those 5,000 square foot old hippies growing, legally growing cannabis, and so all the big players are taking, are buying up everything, and everything, is growing, the Carpinteria and Salinas Valleys, those places with the big greenhouses. Those are the ones that are really doing well. You probably heard about that immigration rate they had at that one in
and
Camarillo,
yeah.
where they found out, all the, problems with their workforce. I actually, the person that the company, the organization that owns that, um, obviously, there were some underage workers there that were undocumented underage workers, which created a legal problem, right? I mean, you're licensed, right? You're licensed to do this stuff. Uh, you have some workforces that that aren't citizens. That's okay. That's okay. We can deal with that. But then you have minors who are working there unaccompanied with, and their
And it,
parents aren't even anywhere to be
a-
found, right?
and this
So
is a cannabis.
yeah, it's a cannabis cultivation place, and so obviously they're going to have some legal problems with that. So I get a phone call, and it's hey, you know, another bigger player is going to buy us out. Try to get us out of this situation. And so the two attorneys got together and they said, okay, you take, this person is selling. You guys go get your appraiser, and then the people who want to buy, you guys go get your appraiser. Bring us their names, and then we'll go order a couple of appraisals, and then we'll look at both of them and settle, on a price. And so both of them went out and came back, and they gave the lawyers, both of them gave them my name.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden, and they said, well, you want to get someone else? No, they both wanted me because I do. You know, People pass appraisals around, so I've done more than anybody for by
Well, and they
far.
know you're a straight arrow too. You're not going to be skewed or swayed based by pressures that one side may or may not throw your way. And if they
Yeah, you
did,
couldn't be in the business 44 years if you did. You
no,
just you're not going to last that long. And when they started lending on the cannabis stuff, it wasn't banks that were lending on it because it's not federally legal. There's a conflict between federal and state laws, so banks can't get involved with lending on those things. So in the beginning, who was lending on it? It was private
private money.
money.
Yeah.
We had a couple in the CMA that did a pretty good job on it. Pretty smart people
Yeah.
knowing what they're doing, and lending on it. And so then if I was the number one private money appraiser, then who's getting the jobs in the beginning when it first became legal in that respect to appraise these places? It's
Yeah.
basically me. So, by just by of my position, I had to figure out how to appraise these things and how to protect my lenders and how to make sure that we're not appraising business goodwill. We're not giving value. The licenses don't transfer, so you can't. You can't give value to a license.
Don't get me started on that Adelanto. It's you got to
I've done a lot of them up there.
yeah.
Do you have a bad experience up there?
Well, it's just dirt in Adelanto. It's a I compare it to
You never built.
Yeah, the Joshua Tree boom coming out of COVID with the short term rental. But once they restrict those licenses, or then those licenses aren't as value, sorry, your 1,200 square foot new build in Joshua Tree is not worth $1.2 million under normal circumstances. And I
Well,
think
Atlanta, one of their big problems is electricity. They couldn't get the power they need out there.
yeah, I mean we had
They're on a waiting list for that.
Yeah, we had one deal that kept hitting our desk. It's like, I just can't get to that value. And go back to your point, you go 2014, 15, 16, 17, doing that small industrial in the Long Beach, Torrance, all that whole pocket over there, even down into the Orange County area. Some
Yeah, Santa
industrial.
Ana had a lot of properties.
Yeah, but you could look and it is clear as day once that's picking up that just on your bare number price per square foot, you're seeing industrial like double on some comps on a price per square foot. And it's
It
like,
was, yeah. It's
no,
not as
in
much
in
anymore.
that time frame, it was weird.
Oh,
And
in
it's
that
like,
time
but
frame. Yeah, are you kidding?
no, and you could see it that like year over year, it was a sizable bump. And it's like cannabis property, cannabis, probably owner user, not cannabis. But you have some brokers that would send us a deal. It's like, here's what they're paying in cash and rent.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it
yeah.
should be worth this. And I'm like, well, Uncle Joe, if he takes this, is going to occupy this property. He's paying like 25% of what they're paying. So we have to use that. And I'm sure that was a
Absolutely.
challenge.
Well, because if they sell it, they can't transfer the license. Now, there's some creative ways that they do it. Somebody stays on title after the property transfers, a certain percentage, and the other person gets qualified and stuff like that in a year or so, and then the other person slowly kind of drops off. But as a lender, you're not going to rely on that. That's not, I mean, that's not something. So yeah, like for instance, in Long Beach during the time, right back when they were, you'd have a regular industrial building selling $150 a foot,
Yeah.
and then you'd have these other ones all of a sudden start selling 400 or 500 bucks a foot. And
And
you're
they're
like,
more distressed and beat up than the one that was selling at a buck
exactly,
fifty.
because they're buying them and they're going to transfer them in, but they're paying a premium because they're in an area that they're allowing, cannabis to be, you know, and those are the ones in the warehouses. They're all too small. None of those make sense anymore. None of
Yeah.
those facilities whatsoever make any sense. No one's making any money on that. 60% of all the product grown in California, despite California's best efforts to regulate every particular clone, from clone to destruction,
Yeah.
each plant, 60% still going out the back door. And I'm not naming names, but I was at a large facility the other day, and I'm walking all around doing all this stuff, and it's a Dutch guy who used to grow flowers, knows everything about, growing and drying and trimming and all the stuff. He's really, it really has, learned well about it. Well, there's this back, and they manufacture, so they package and everything. You got to package, have it inspected, do all this sort of stuff. All this regulations, all up the board. It looks really great. And then I get into this back room with the shipping door on the back, and there's these they use these bins like you get at Costco, the ones you
Yeah.
put in your garage, and they're all full of these 1 pound uh plastic bags of of bud. None of them are labeled, none of them have anything on it. And the door opens, some guy pulls up a Toyota Camry, buys 4 or 5 pounds, puts in his trunk and drives off, you know. Y- And right in front of me, I'm like, geez, you guys aren't even trying to hide this. But over 60%, I think it's about 60% now, they figure is going to the illicit means, the black market. And the problem with California is it's very much a demand, but you can't cross state lines with the product. So, um, so where's that 60% going? It's not going on the streets because the price here is so inexpensive. People
Yeah.
don't have a problem, but it's going across state lines. It's going to other areas,
Hmm.
and and so because here it's taxed. It was still Schedule 1, so you can't. Let's say I own a dispensary, right? So I have rent, I have employees, I have utilities, I have all these expenses. Well, I can't write off any of the expenses, but I'm taxed on my gross income. The only expense you can write off is what you purchased it for. The difference between what you purchased it for and what you sold it for, but none of your other expenses. So, and then you're taxed on top of that. It's a very hard business to make money at, and
Hmm.
that's what people are finding.
Yeah, it's again, I think it's a prime example of how quickly a strategy and markets change, and then the valuations can
Exactly.
change
Just like we
in
were talking about the affordable housing, a creative office was all the thing back in the dot-com boom, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hey, we can't get enough of that. I remember down in Venice Beach doing appraising and all that stuff that Google's buying up. And then San Jose, I do a lot of stuff in Northern California, San Jose and their Google Village and stuff. That's all scaled back. And, a lot of that stuff is, so what is it good for? The other thing, I've been trailing all the large department stores closing. Sears closed, I think, what,
Yeah.
23 stores. I appraised quite a few of those. And who's buying those? It's not another large department store. I mean, the last one I did, I got one, I think it's in Ventura. They're actually bringing in like uh, a GameStop type, not a GameStop, like a Game One or something like that, where, they have trampolines and,
Yeah, big
all kinds of
trampoline. I've
stuff.
seen trampoline parks going. I've seen like the Ninja Warrior type
Yeah, yeah, that type of
go
stuff,
into
like
some of
adult
those.
entertainment type of things, like,
Yeah.
like a Dave and Buster's type of thing with all sorts of, so that's kind of and then they're also chopping them up and making them into smaller spaces too. The
Yeah.
big lots, all those that have closed down. And recently, was it Rite Aid closed, and Walgreens closed a bunch of stores. I've appraised 3 or 4 of those in the last couple of months.
And then even your restaurant chains, like the big ones,
Yeah,
the Red Lobster, it's Outback. I've been seeing those shut. Your Mimi's Cafes. There's some pockets over here, Carlsbad Oceanside, where very desirable location, but these restaurants vacated a few years ago. Didn't really make it out of COVID, and they haven't been. No one else has taken up that lease and putting a new restaurant in on that.
yeah.
Now you just have this restaurant retail just kind of sitting.
So
Uh,
so these guys who are in this trouble, they bring this loan package to you with some sort of lousy appraisal guarantee, some sort of appraisal that's appraising,
They're comping
pie in the
stuff from
sky.
Newport Beach, and I'm in Oceanside. It's like, "Get out of here
Exactly.
with that."
Exactly. With no locational adjustments. And so I'll get a letter and they'll bring me the appraisal and say, "What do you think?" And it's like, well, I can only look at it with one hand because the other hand I'm holding my nose. and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then meanwhile, the broker who brings it, his client's already paid for an appraisal, right? So
Yeah.
now I'm sitting there, well, they it needs another one. And by the
And
way,
how
you're
does
not
he
going to like
tell
the
his
value.
client? And chances are that broker said, "Hey, you could use this appraiser. It should be fine." And
Exactly.
now he's got to go explain to him why it's part of my French dog shit and worth the paper it's written on. And then they got to get a new one. So this is a good transition. I want to jump into red flags in an appraisal. If someone's accepting an appraisal or going to use it as a heat check, from your experience, what are like 2 or 3 quick spot checks they can do on that appraisal to one, check the integrity of it, or what pops up as a red flag in your eyes as an experienced appraiser?
First thing you should do is look at who the appraiser is. Number one. Now we're all licensed. We're licensed. You have a trainee license. You have what's called a licensee. You have a residential licensee, and then you have a general license. Okay, I'm a general license. I can appraise anything, right?
Okay.
Um, so the first thing is, if you're getting a commercial property, you have an AR or an AL or an AT who's appraising it. They're not qualified to appraise that property.
Mm.
Now for a federal transaction. Now, a lot of guys will say, well, hey, I'm a private money lender. It's not a federal transaction. So I use a residential appraiser to do a commercial property. Well, you know, they're not licensed to do that. So how many of those appraisals are they doing? How experienced are they? The reason they pick the residential, it's either their guy or it's somebody really inexpensive. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'll do it for $1,000. I'll do a big commercial property for $1,000, and they'll put it on a single family form or some ridiculous thing, and it makes no sense at all. So first thing is look at who's appraising the property. Go back and see what kind of experience they have. How long they've been in the business, what type of properties they appraise. If someone's bringing you a shopping center appraisal, you know, how many shopping centers have you done in the last year or 2 years? You know, um, I I work all over California when it comes to location wise, because for commercial, you really, and I do unusual commercials, so I'm all over the place. I go down to San Diego Airport. In an hour I'm up to San Jose, and an hour and a half I'm at the property. I mean, it's that I've got it down that simple. And I do several. I actually do. I'm located in Southern California, and I do 60% of my business in Northern California.
Hmm.
So no, Northern California as well. I know. So number one, look at who's appraising the property. When you got a broker bringing something in, I know it's never happened to you, but sometimes brokers misrepresent the values of properties. You know, I guess so.
I'm
That's
taking
number one.
20% right off the top. Right
Just
off
kind
the
of
top.
right. So I get that. So that's one thing I see, and then because I look over a lot of appraisals. The other one is are they appraising the property correctly? You know, so that goes to who's going to buy the property, who's the most likely buyer, and they are appraising it to that. What's the highest and best use? Most places you see some standardized boilerplate, highest and best use. It's one paragraph or two paragraphs. They're not even getting into, testing what the highest and best use is. They're just saying, well, we think it's this. Well, no, you prove it to me. Show me. If it's close, especially show me.
Yeah.
So I want to know that. And then, I think my clients, I give them not only an appraisal proper way to appraise it in the highest best use, but oftentimes I also give them, what the alternate use would be. So they can underwrite. They have the ability to underwrite and see, what the worst case scenario might be. You want to give your lender those tools, you know, to underwrite. You're not doing the value and walking away, and that's your assignment. I've been working with people in CMA for 30 plus years, 30 years,
Mhm.
pretty much some of them, and my job is to give them more than just an appraised value. I'm going to give them information and all this sort of stuff too. It's very important. You're the eyes and ears. You
Yeah.
know, and the shame of it is in the modern environment, with especially with residential, with AMCs and such, you've lost that ability to have the connection with the appraiser. Used to be that you go get your guy that you trust. He's your eyes and ears, and you can work in such a way and form a relationship. And that's why people send me up to San Francisco or to Eureka or wherever. Is because they want me to look at it. They
I wanna
know
know
they
that you're walking the property, and I want
exactly.
your eyes, your feet, and your experience on value and properties, on what's going on in the neighborhood. There's value in that. a lot of
Exactly.
value.
When you've been doing it for 44 years and have a relationship that, you're going to give them all the highs and lows of the property. You're going to give them all the information that they need, and usually most appraisers are, do well until one down cycle, and then all their appraisals start coming back. And then the appraisal, we always have to say that you're only as good as your last appraisal, right? I mean, you could be with someone 20 years and do a bad appraisal and the phone never ring again for the rest of your life. I mean, that's the way it works out. So, it's really important to, to and with the birth of AMC's for those poor people in the residential, do the residential stuff. That's awful. They're charging you $600, $750 for an appraisal that goes to the AMC. Then the AMC puts that appraisal out for bids to the lowest bidder. And you got someone doing an appraisal for $225 and the AMC is getting $750. The consumer's paying a fortune for the appraisal and getting the worst appraisal,
And we've
and
seen there's some deals, and again, a small sample size, where I have seen property revert back to the lender, and then they go to relist this property, and they're going to be taking a loss of principal. Granted, some of these have been a value add, but I saw one in Palm Springs. It's I'm not sure if it's sold yet, but loan is at 80% of the purchase price for a non-value add, so high leverage point loan right out the get-go. I think their loan was $1 million. Um, you pull up Street View, and I'm just using back of napkin Redfin, right? It's like, okay, I'm seeing properties over here that would support that purchase price, but that is a completely different neighborhood, gated community, more of an exclusive spot. The street this property is on, you guys are off by like $700,000 of value, 800,000. Like it is glaring.
oh yeah,
Pro-
well, yeah, right, because you
Yeah,
you have these exclusive little gated developments, and then one street over is something that's not.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it was probably a short-term rental, so they're saying, "I got value in this, I'm gonna get this income." Once that license gets stripped and that income goes, you have a regular SFR. So they're probably gonna take, I think the last math on it was about a $400,000 loss of principal on a
Ouch. Yeah.
first position loan. Based on who the lender is, I know they have the first one probably through an AMC, and then they have a secondary valuation, which is a BPO. Sometimes those are from the same valuation company and the
I
same
love those
person that
BPOs. Yeah, those are
holy
great.
crap. Oh, we did, I saw one where an appraisal completed. They wanted a secondary valuation, so the company sent the appraiser to do the BPO. Do you think the BPO that was done by the initial appraiser had a variance in value? Probably. It was not. So the guy that did the BPO also did the initial appraisal.
Oh, they said the same person.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
And they accept it. It's like, hey, it's a secondary valuation. It's on two different forms, but
And
it's
technically,
just
appraiser can't do a BPO because an appraiser has to go through well, maybe he could. It would be called the restricted report because he already did the appraisal. But if I just go out to do a BPO, if I'm at a function with you, we're out at a CMA function, it's cocktail hour, we're both having a cocktail, and you talk about something, and well, what do you think this property's worth? And I write down, 100,000 to 200,000 on a cocktail napkin.
yeah.
I will have had to have done the process of a full appraisal to come up with that number to give to you because I'm a licensed appraiser. So I have people all the time ask me, hey, you know what? We really don't want to spend money on a full appraisal. Can we get a BPO? And a,
You're
and
like,
a,
I can't.
a regular appraiser can't do that. Now, I could do a restricted appraisal, but that doesn't mean it just means I'm giving you less information about the property when I give you the value, but I have to have a working file that has the full appraisal, all the analysis, everything in it
Yeah.
in order to give you that and I have, that's stated in the restricted appraisal. So it really
Hmm,
doesn't save a heck of a lot of time in that respect.
interesting.
Um, but yeah, I get asked
It
all the time about doing BPOs, and I've seen BPOs that just, oh my goodness,
it's hey, you can't in the private money space. We are utilized because we could close deals in fewer days. That's the value add we bring. But you can't necessarily, you shouldn't jeopardize the quality of your file or your underwrite based on speed. There's certain assets that are just extremely difficult to value.
we're always
And
dealing with speed. Everyone, yeah,
yeah,
what do
it's
you want? It's
everything's a
always yes.
rush. But if everything's urgent, nothing's urgent. So it's like,
Exactly.
what's the balance here? What are we working with? If someone say me, I just started my company. I'm looking to get it and start doing commercial deals. What are some questions you would recommend I use when interviewing appraisers, while narrowing them down?
First one is, what's Paul Marinkovich's phone number? That would be number. That solves all your problems right off the bat. You got the best, and you got the most experienced, and someone's going to, like you said, pick up the phone and be able to do that. Now, if for some reason I'm out of the picture, maybe sitting in the hospital somewhere or whatever, then I would say that one of the look at their experience. You know, how much experience we're doing. Let We're doing an office building in Davis, 3 stories vacant. How much experience do you have in, up in that area? How much experience do you have with office buildings? What are the current trends you're seeing in the market? Those type of questions, uh, I would ask up front. That would be an important thing. Um,
And I like how they're all open-ended questions because I think you want them to start talking and explain it versus just yes or no. Like, Paul, do you do
Exactly.
office
You
buildings?
want to
Yes.
hear why they
Yeah.
yeah. You want to hear what I have a client who'll call me. I'll start talking about well, office spaces. I think right now San Francisco retail and office. It's 30-40% vacancy right now. I mean, it's crazy. And so you need to know that. If you don't know that, then you're gonna what are you gonna learn in the
Yeah.
process. Now we all learn in the process to a certain point because, if I haven't been there for 3 months and I go back and things have changed, I got to go back and look and, I know what the market's doing, what's happening and stuff like that. But if you're not in the trenches every day doing these properties, you don't know what these trends are. You don't know, like the mobile home place that was going to be turning into affordable units. If I didn't go down and look at all the permits that were being pulled, all the things that I wouldn't know that the area was already saturated. I just jump on the hoopla with everyone else. And of course, all my comps are 6 months to a year old. So that's not talking about what's going on currently. That's talking about what happened 6 months or a year ago. And a lot of those contracts were put together, you know, uh, someone who's buying a buildable site, a lot of times they'll have an escrow where it'll be a year long because they want to start getting entitlements before they actually close escrow. They'll give a
Yeah.
deposit, non-refundable deposits, and keep moving. But so a lot of those escrows, when they initially negotiated the value, was maybe even a year before the property actually closed, right? So if the comp is a year old and it was negotiated a year previous to that, you really have a 2-year old comp in that respect, right? So
And especially when we've gone through the past few years with interest rates running away, values pulling back. I mean, it's different during everyone that got, I think, bailed out with the ultra cheap money right out of COVID, where property you negotiate your purchase price today, a year later, you're in a really good spot. In that
right,
scenario you're explaining, it's like
price
it
of
could be
hotels up
flipped.
around that time. Yeah,
Yeah, it could be flipped where no, now it didn't appreciate 10%, it depreciated 10%, and you're in a overpaying.
exactly. And so that's why an appraisal is based upon history. I mean, we're not fortune tellers. But we can kind of look and see. I mean, there's ways to consider what's going on presently, even using historical comps. We make, and this is another thing that most appraisers don't do. They don't do an adequate job on making uh, date of sale adjustments. In other words, where's the market going? Up, down, sideways? You know, that we do an extensive process to figure out how we're going to adjust those comparables that are a year old, right? How do
Yeah.
we adjust those, right? It's very, very important. Also, what's the highest? It's also confirming your comparables. What did this person buy this? Oh, well, I'm doing a shopping center. So here's another shopping center, 6 months old. And so like for like, right? It's perfect. But the guy who bought the shopping center didn't buy it as a shopping center. He bought it as he bought it as one part of a developmental play of 4 or 5 properties that he's going to combine and build something bigger. So what he paid for wasn't really a shopping center. It was the last leg of his uh, of the lots that he needed to build this much larger project. Now, if you don't go in and confirm that, figure that out, that's not a comp. That's not a good comp. That's a land sale, right? And so,
Yeah.
so I, and that's why it's sold at $500 a square foot. And the rest of the market around it is at $300 a square foot, right?
Yeah.
And if I don't go in and find that out, I mean, if you look at my analysis on each comparable, it's a page and a half long of material confirming the comp, what's going to be done with it, all the information about it. Most appraisals just go ahead and list the address and the square foot and making it,
Yeah, they
put it
do
in the
that, and
grid
you'll
and
see a one-page rec, and
yeah,
then maybe a
exactly.
brief description per
Like
asset on why I think
three
this
or
one
four
carries the
sentences.
yeah. No.
Yeah. Same thing with the highest and best use. They don't really get into it or look at it. And then the market, I mean, and then locational adjustments, like you're talking about, you're pricing something in Oceanside and then you're using Laguna Beach or using, certain other areas, right? And with no location adjustment, I pretty much on every appraisal, I actually run location adjustments on everything and then see if I need them. If it's so minuscule, the difference,
Yeah.
that but I've already run the information to double check, you know,
Yeah.
and then I would say, depending on the property type, like, because I do a lot of commercial, so things are spread out a little bit more, like a shopping center, you know, if it's a bigger shopping center, you're going to different regions, maybe there's only one big shopping center in each jurisdiction or something like that.
Yeah.
So then you need to make locational adjustments, and I don't see people doing that. Sometimes they're substantial. What's
I
the rent? The
I
rent
I
in
looked at a
Newport
commercial
Beach
deal
is different than Oceanside, right?
yeah, I looked at an office deal twice in the last 4 months in Lake Elsinore. Great little medical office building. There's not too many office buildings like medical office around, so and it's a 2023 appraisal, I believe, but, the comps were so far away and spread, but there was no adjustments for distance. I was like, "I am not an appraiser, but these are clearly different locations."
Yeah,
And
what are the rents in, Newport Beach, and then what are the rents in I'm saying Oceanside. Oceanside's actually coming to its own now. It's really becoming,
oh,
it's
oh,
getting
yeah.
there. But what are the rents in Oceanside? What are the rents in Newport Beach? Well, that's a factor you can look at to make an adjustment. What's the median price for square foot of commercial property of retail properties in Newport Beach versus the ones in Oceanside? There's another factor you can use to make adjustments. What's the cap rate on properties in Oceanside versus the cap rate on properties in Newport? There's another thing you can make an adjustment on. I'd use all three of them, and then I
Yeah.
would I would give weight to each one, and then come up with an adjustment based upon that. We have a very scientific way. We're the only appraisers I know that are using standard deviation and statistical analysis of a lot of our reconciliations of things. In other words, instead of me just saying, "Oh, I have my range is from 150 to $250 a square foot, and I bring it in at $200."
Yeah.
Tell me what that means. That,
Yeah.
that means that you've got that disparity. So how did you arrive at that? You know,
Yeah.
and we've created a way, and it's actually I honestly think the new single family forms that are coming out and some of the software, my software provider for single family, I believe has taken my standard deviation analysis that I've created is actually employing it as its software. I can't
Hmm.
prove it, but I've never seen anyone else do it. I've never seen another appraiser have it before.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's coming out with this like it's something brand new, and it's like, so
You're like,
I'm too
"That's
old to,
that's been
I'm
done,
too
and
old to
it's
try to
tried
go
and
and sue him
true."
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
It's,
too old to go try and sue him or something like that. But, I guess it's someone
pick your
copying
battle.
these.
Pick
Yeah.
your battle.
But
I
but
get
when I come up with when I have first of all, I don't have a range that big. If you make the adjustments correctly, your range should tighten. There's a way to measure that. That's the difference between an adjusted standard deviation and the regular standard deviation. In other words, you should show that as a result of your adjustments, you've tightened the range. You've brought things together. You've made things make in an ideal situation, a perfect situation, all your adjusted comparables will come out to be the same. Now, it's not a perfect world, so that never happens. But the more that they tighten, better job you've done of your adjustments, if your adjustments are all warranted. So when you're making those locational adjustments and if all these other different adjustments, your range should tighten.
mhm.
It should get tighter, and it should lead you to more of a definite value. And then the comparables that you have left, how much weight are you putting on each comparable? Most appraisers just again they 200 that $200 right in the middle, or more often than not, 150 to 250 range, and they're bringing in at 250. You know,
Alright, so I'm gonna go, we'll go with 223 today just because it's
make it
Friday.
look good. Yeah,
Yeah,
right, right.
so it's not even. So we're
But
running
you
already an
you
go
you
ahead.
see one of my appraisals, you're going to see exactly how I arrived at that number. Exactly. I mean, exactly how I arrived at that number. It was all done through a method and through giving weight to comps and actually applying it and mathematically doing that, you know?
Well, when I think what's also great, it's I know I highlighted this earlier. You'll pick up the phone and answer it and answer questions and explain the mindset behind because some of these commercial appraisals, it's not just a sales comparison approach on an SFR where you could understand that very easily. Sometimes, like I'm confused on how these adjustments work, and you're able to jump on the phone, break it down, and more importantly, provide explanations. And I think there's great value in that. Um,
Yeah, a lot of times, and a lot of appraisers, "Oh, we're busy, we don't have to." I pick up the phone pretty much whenever it rings, unless it's got spam written on it, and, I'll be on the phone 45 minutes to a client that I never get the appraisal from, but I
yeah,
answer a lot of questions, that's just my job, that's my job, that's still my job,
yeah,
I have my clients that I work for. I'm kind of a boutique appraiser in that respect. I I try my my goal is to try to get, a few dozen really good clients and then just work kind of exclusively, and, and give them my best. Now that people pass appraisals around, so I've ended up doing a lot more than that. But I do have my core people
yeah,
that give me a lot of business. And, I pick up the phone, I talk to them. And
yeah,
I'll get people I've never done an appraisal for. They'll call me up and I'll be on the phone 45 minutes with them, about a situation. And I don't mind doing it, because it's education for them. I
yeah.
mean,
So
and it's a good thing. So
so we're running it already an hour. I told you this go by quick.
believe it. I thought, what am I going to talk about for an hour?
Don't worry, I got questions. So we're gonna do a little bit of a rapid fire, just three more questions.
Okay.
Uh, First question, a lot of times we'll be a broker will bring us a deal to fund and they say, "Hey, I already got an appraisal completed. Can you accept this appraisal?" Would you mind just highlighting for the everyone that's listening on this, what is the risk for me as a lender just accepting that appraisal at face value with maybe no appraisal assignment or anything of that sort? Or is there any risk in that? Or
I guess you'd be your experience. I've had people, I won't name names, but I've had people that, who say, you know, I'll done all this research to get a cap rate and all this stuff. And then, they'll look at me and say, I've been in a business 40 years. There's no way that could be a 6% cap rate. I don't know
I
if you know
hate
what I'm
that
talking
line.
about, but yeah. And it's like, you need to use an eight. Well, the eight's not supported. There's nothing
Yeah,
that shows that, makes no sense whatsoever. So there's a lot of lenders, especially in the CMA, who've had a lot of experience, and they look at an appraisal and I'm sure you can look at a lot of appraisals and say, hey, something doesn't smell right about this,
real quick. Yeah,
Right. So a lot of times, my clients will send me the appraisal. What do you think of this, Paul? And I'll look at it. And, I'm pretty picky. So,
yeah,
I'll say the methodology is a little bit weird, but, in the end, the final price isn't that bad. I mean, I
yeah.
pulled my hair out looking at it, but in the end, the final values, it's kind of in there, but the way they got there is like completely, out to the wind. So they'll say, well, hey, can you do a review? And the problem with reviewing an appraisal of someone else's is, once I review it, I have to assume full responsibility for what they came up with. So I essentially have to go redo the appraisal. If
Yeah.
I'm going to take responsibility for it, put my name on it. I got to make sure that, everything's
That
correct.
that's
I
a
can't
good
just
point
take
to
what you do.
highlight for I mean, as a lender, I wanna ask these questions. "Hey, can you just do a quick appraisal review?" Again, it save my client some money, but you're taking on just as much liability in providing that
Absolutely.
review
And
because
just as
you're
much as the original appraiser, if not more, you know? So when I end up, the times that I do try to do that, I'll look at it. Usually I'll look at it and say, it's not that bad and the value's within reason,
yeah,
and I'll pull some cops and do that and look at it. Um, or, this thing's, this thing should be turned in and we
dumpster
want
fire, start over. Yeah.
exactly. And, and I'm honest about it.
Yeah.
I'm honest. There's a few. I mean, your average commercial appraiser is probably in their 70s, late 70s. It's hard to get new people coming in. I've got my bonus daughter. She's she's working on getting her MAI, so we'll be bringing her on board.
Oh, exciting.
And yeah, so and I'm training her, from scratch. So she's going to be really good.
Well, just
And I have
getting
my
that
son working with me,
yeah, and your
Gabriel.
son's name, you said Gabriel?
Gabriel, yeah, he'll be up at the conference with
Oh,
us
very
in
good.
Monterey. Yeah,
I always like putting a face to the name. Uh,
yeah.
Next rapid fire question. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things over the years walking properties. What is, off the top of your mind, what is the one property you walked that just completely shocked you or surprised you? Like whether there was someone, I don't know, having a meth lab in there, or were you walk a property and you were just absolutely scared out of your mind and had to run out of there because you were scared for your life? What is one one
Oh, yeah, I know.
property walk through that just you will never
You want
forget?
the dead bodies, naked bodies, machine gun pointed at me? Which one do you want? I'll give you spin the
Oh,
wheel.
let's go machine gun.
Okay, in the early time of doing the cannabis properties, and that's why it kind of I was actually thinking about trying to design some sort of a shirt, that kind of identified me, so they would,
Yeah.
in the early going, everything was really protected because everything converted from being an illegal grow to being a legal grow, and these people were in the process of doing that, and we were in there appraising it, and the guy sent me in, and he like unlocked the gate and let me in and go through. And he unlocked the building and I start going through. And I walked into the building and all of a sudden, uh, I see people scattering and they're, uh, um, they're all one persuasion and they were in there, with the grow and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And guns and machine guns came out and thinking I was somebody,
That
nefarious
shouldn't
or
be there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Or maybe the law or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And I actually had those things pointed at me, and the other guy had to come in and explain who I was. And then that guy and another guy started arguing like crazy. And then they started coming to blows and beating each other up and getting into this serious fight. The guns came out and everything. It's like I'm like, holy cow, what the heck is going on? And then these guys, okay, well, we need to pay you for the appraisal. They'll go in, open up a safe, and they got these cash counting machines and all. Because that's right now, it's still that way because they can't deal, they can't use credit
They can't put it
cards or
in the bank.
banks.
Yeah.
So every cannabis place, when they build them, they build a big safe room, with like a bank vaults and stuff like that, which, so, and then the guy ends up paying me, in $100 bills, for the appraisal
Did you
and
double your fee after getting gunshot pointed at you?
scared the hell out of me. I had
Oh,
to change my shorts, I think,
I was
after
gonna say
that
it
one.
gave me the chills. That would oh man. All right, last
Yeah,
question. That's
mhm.
crazy. Last question for you. Complete 180 pivot. When you're not appraising properties and working, growing your business, what do you do for fun? What makes you tick?
Oh, I have a boat in San Diego Harbor that I enjoy hanging out on. It's docked over there at the Hyatt Regency down there, and so I get out on the water and swim, jump in the water, barbecue, sit out there. I got a couple dogs that give me walking 4.5 miles every day with them, and so I enjoy that. And then family, I got we moved my bonus daughter and bonus granddaughter in to the house, so we're raising her. We're taking her over to SoFi Stadium. Cheerleading. She's in a cheerleading camp, and she's actually going to be doing kind of a pregame thing for the Rams Colts game on
Oh,
Sunday.
that's
So
gonna be a blast.
yeah, we'll be out there. She's only 5, but we have her practicing every day. She's
Her
doing little
eyes are gonna
drill
be
practice.
this big
Oh yeah,
walking into that
she's so outgoing that it's no issue for her at all. She's totally fine with it. She's just loving it. So just kind of doing that and enjoying. I'm 64, so I've not quite as wild as I used to be. I kind of enjoy things quiet, a little quieter nowadays. And the
less is more
last
sometimes.
thing I want to do when I'm not working is talk about appraisals. So
Well, sorry for dragging you onto this. At least it's
no
within
problem.
working hours.
It's been a very
Uh,
fun conversation, actually.
well, Paul, I appreciate your support of CMA over the years, as well as being such a great resource to all the members with your valuation and your appraisers. And more importantly, thank you for jumping in the hot seat with me. This was a lot of
No
fun.
problem. It's been a lot.
I
Actually, been a lot
told
of
you it'd
fun.
go by fast. I
I was a
told
little
you it'd go.
nervous about it, but I I don't do this very often, but I thought, hey, it's pretty cool. I do it on the phone. I was yesterday. I'm talking to someone on the phone. It's like 45 minutes, and I said, "Oh, well, thanks for helping me out because I got to do an hour tomorrow." So, this wasn't hard.
Very good. Well,
And
well,
you're always
thanks
fun to
again
work with, Brad. So,
thanks for your time,
always
and
enjoy working with you.
I'll see you in a week and a half now.
You
Coming up
bet. Up
quick.
in
Flying
beautiful
all right.
Monterey.
Love it. All right, Paul.
Pleasure.